Got the shock back from getting refilled with nitrogen, and I'm going to go ahead and start pressing some bearings in. In order to do this, the ring groove is on this end, so the reservoir has to face down, which makes it a little bit annoying to get into the press like this, but here's how I'm going to do it. All right, let's go ahead and get this pressed in. My kit came with 4 of these retaining rings. I can't seem to figure out why. Must be for a different model or something, because the only retaining ring I know of is this one right here. I checked the parts diagram. I don't see any more, so I'm just going to take one of these and stick it in there. Oops. Okay, let me try that again. There's 2 different styles of dust seals that come with this kit. One of them thicker on the left, one of them thinner on the right. The thinner one is the one that's going to go up top. I'm going to go ahead and put a little more grease in here before I put these seals in. Here goes one. Here goes the other. And we'll go ahead and get that seal put in. There's also 2 styles of collars here. One smaller with an O-ring, and one a little bit bigger with no O-ring. The O-ring ones go on the top. Okay, I was having a little bit of trouble figuring out which of these bearing collars to use in which part of the linkage. So here's how I figured that out. According to the repair manual, this one, the bearing should be about 0.22 inches in. I measured the width of this, and we get about 1.41. I'm going to go 1.41. Then I'm going to measure this bearing, and it's about 0.91. So we're going to do minus 0.91. It gives us 0.5, and then we have to remember it's going to be centered, so there should be a gap on each side. So we divided that by 2, and that gives us 0.25, which is pretty close to 0.22. Certainly more than, well, actually, oh yeah, certainly more than the difference here in width. So it looks like the wider ones go with this smaller linkage. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and grease this up just a little bit, and we'll get to pressing. Okay, I can tell just by looking at that that it needs to go quite a bit further down. That's looking a lot closer now. Let's measure. I'll try and get this on camera. This one, or this direction, it's about 0.225. And in this direction, we're at 222. So that's pretty dang close. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'll do the other side now. Now the last one, the bottom of this hole was maybe just a little bit past flush with the top of this linkage when it was at about the right height. So I'm going to look out for that. Okay, let's see how it looks. 0.195, and this way 0.255. 0.214 maybe? 0.230, 45. I'm going to go just a tiny bit more down. See if I can get that on camera. There's 230. It's about 230 on both sides. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to set this aside for now. This one should be done. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do this linkage next. For this one, since we have the two bearings side by side, we're going to make sure the number markings are facing outward. Put a little bit of grease. I'm going to attempt to start this out differently this time. I'm going to put the bearing on the bottom. Should be a decent setup, I hope. This won't get me all the way because it needs to go below flush, but for now, if anything falls, it'll be the socket, and that'll at least get me started in there. And then once it's started going and it's not going to fall out, then I can switch to a different method. Okay, it looks like my plates are lifting up, so I need to reposition a little bit. I don't think I actually need to be on the corner here. Yeah, this part doesn't stick down that much. So go ahead and bring these over here. Now I'll flip it around. Okay, that all looks pretty good and square now. Okay, I purposely pressed this a little further than I want to go. The reason for that is that'll guarantee that these two bearings are butted up together. Once I put the second one in, it'll keep going until it makes contact with this one, and then it'll be forced to push this one back up a little bit until we get it centered how I want. Looks like I forgot to put the numbers facing outward on this one, but at least one of them's readable. It's the same part number on both, so it shouldn't be too big a deal. Okay, let's measure. Okay, I can tell just by looking at it that it's pressed in way further this way. A big gap there, almost none there. I wasn't totally in love with how that last socket was fitting, but this one seems to be a lot better fit. Should be really doing a good job pressing just on the outside of that bearing. $250 thou, $245 thou. Pretty close to $250 actually. $245, $250. Yeah, I got pretty lucky there. Awesome. Last, we have this spherical bearing here. This one is PTFE lined, so there should be no grease needed on the inside, but I'm still going to grease the outside for a nice easy press. It would appear that this came in both my linkage bearing kit and shock bearing kit, so that was kind of interesting. Same part number, only used once on the bike. Okay, that's about 290 thou this way, about 286 thou this way. Got really lucky on this one too. So now we can go ahead and put in the dust seals and the colors. I'm going to put a little bit of grease in here. Here's the first one, here's the second one, and here's our colors. Should be anyway. Guess I'll try and press them in. Oh, this bottom one started to go, maybe. No, that's not right. I think I just got it. Oh yeah. Alright, so here's what I did. Since it was giving me trouble, they were both going in kind of crooked. So it was like, if you imagine the bearings, they wanted to go like this when I pressed them originally. So what I did is I took the dust seal off one of them, and I put one of these collars upside down so that it would hold the inner sphere of the bearing. And then I put the small end in here to hold it square. And then I just pressed this one in. So that way I was only trying to press in one at a time. And this surface was square, so that would line up this surface as it was going in. Now, I'm going to put this dust seal back in and do essentially the same thing, but in reverse. Excellent. Bearing moves good. I'm happy with that. All right, I guess tomorrow be ready to put all this stuff back on the bike. Okay, we're down in the basement with the bike, the new parts, or at least newly refurbished parts, and we go ahead and start putting stuff on. Pretty noisy down here right now. Air conditioner's running full blast. I think I'm going to end up doing most of this kind of a time lapse since the audio won't be that great. Let's get to it. Instead of time lapse, I ended up deciding to just do a voiceover. First thing I did was reinstall the jam nuts for the spring back on the shock body. If you remember from the teardown video, these were so dirty it was hard to get them to move at all, but now that they're all cleaned up, they spin nice and free and easy. Next, the spring goes on in the lower seat to hold it. According to Honda, the initial spring length should be 7.15 inches. This is just a baseline. Once the bike's complete, it'll need to be adjusted anyway to achieve the correct amount of sag with the rider on it. After the desired length is achieved, I hand tighten the jam nut just enough so that things don't move around during install, again keeping in mind that this will need to be fine-tuned later. After that, the shock linkage goes up. For critical fasteners like this, I like to mark them with a paint pen after torquing them. I make a single continuous line that covers the end of the bolt, the nut, and the surface that the nut bears on. This way it is easy to visually check if anything is coming loose for some reason. Okay, we got two different types of seals here. These slightly smaller ones, there's 4 of them. Those go on this linkage here. These slightly larger ones go in this linkage, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. These bearings seem to have already had some grease in them, but I decided to add a little extra inside the seals. There's really not much to putting these seals in, just put them in with your fingers. If it feels tough to do, you're probably doing something wrong. So I just realized there's actually 3 sets of seals that come with this kit. There's the 4 identical ones that go in this linkage, and then there's 2 that look to be about the same, slightly larger size. These kind of tapered ones are the ones that go in the spherical bearing, which I already did down here, that came in the other kit. And these ones, they have squared off edges. Those are for this bearing here. Finally, I'm going to do the rollers. These 2 smaller ones, pretty obvious. They go in this one, and this longer one goes down here. Even though I said these seemed to be pre-greased, I decided to add some more inside anyway before inserting the rollers. I'd much rather have some squeeze out that I have to clean up from having too much grease rather than to have failed bearings because of not enough. Pushing in the rollers is as simple as that. Just push them through. And when you're done, clean up any excess grease from the outside so it doesn't collect dirt and cause unnecessary wear. After all the rollers are installed, the next step is going to be to install the whole shock assembly onto the bike. The Allen-headed bolt is the one that goes through the swing arm and into the shock linkage. I found it easiest to install that first, then to lift the swing arm to line up the top bolt for the shock. The side closer to the engine gets the nut and the washer. This one right here, not this one. And according to the manual, you're supposed to grease the threads on this nut. Next I installed the shock connecting rod into the frame. Mine was a tight fit into the tab, so it needed a bit of persuasion. Just be careful not to hit too hard and damage the aluminum. After I installed and hand tightened the bolt on the frame side, I installed the other end of the connecting rod into the shock linkage. I again used the leverage of the swing arm to help me get this into place. Then I installed and hand tightened the other bolt. I had to use the ratchet to help me get the bolt in all the way, since the weight of the swing arm was now bearing down on this bolt. At this point I realized that the only way I was going to be able to get a torque wrench on the frame side nut of that con rod was if I took the rear brake lever off to get at it. To get that off, there's a cotter pin and a washer that need to be removed from the back side. Before getting that brake lever off, I also had to remove the reservoir and the cover plate. Then just rock it back and forth while pulling outward, applying plenty of lubricant in the process. If yours is as dirty inside the bore as mine was, this could take a lot of effort. At this point I finally had enough room to get a socket and an extension in there to do the final install and torque of that rear shock connecting bolt. Once again I marked the fastener like I talked about before. And then I did the final torque down and marking of the other two bolts that I previously installed. Now that the bottom of the rear suspension is done, I'll go ahead and torque the top bolt for that shock. Off camera, I cleaned the pin and bore for the rear brake lever as best as I could. Then I applied some of the leftover suspension grease on it before reinstalling. I put the skid plate back on, installed the washer and cotter pin back on the back of the lever, then I hooked the spring back onto the lever. Earlier I took off the chain guide to make it easier to get some of the bolts in around the chain, but now that we're done with the suspension, it can go back on. Next was the airbox. It's way easier to connect the boot to the car before the subframe is in place. Once that boot is seated and the clamp is installed, we can go ahead and put the subframe back on and install the 3 bolts. There are also 3 bolts that hold the airbox onto the rear subframe, one on each side and then a third that goes down through the top. Let's put back that rear brake reservoir that I took out a few minutes ago. And don't forget to put back this bolt that mounts the exhaust to the frame. Now I'm going to run the wiring back to where it belongs, and then tighten that third rear subframe bolt that you thought I forgot about a minute ago. The wiring's pretty simple. Just match the colors and shapes on the connectors, tuck it all into the boot, then fold the tab back down around the boot. Next, I'm going to drop the fuel tank back onto the frame. There's a rubber strap facing the rider to hold it to the frame, then there are 2 bolts, one on each side. Also, don't forget to hook the fuel line back up to the car. Next, I'll slide the seat on from the back towards the front. I'll go ahead and tighten up this last exhaust bolt while I still can before I put the side covers on. Finally, the bike is all put back together. It's time to take it up and out of the basement. I guess there is some. Okay. Give it some more cranks.
Cranking hard.
Alright, can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead and put it in reverse. I'm gonna drink after that, my goodness. When I tried to start the bike, it had no spark, so I ended up borrowing the ignition coil from my friend's KLX300 that he was storing at my house. And I headed off on my trip. I logged just under 100 miles of problem-free riding that weekend and had a ton of fun. Thanks for watching, and ride safe.